think a lot of people may consider stepping into part-time seasonal work to make up some extra cash around the holiday season. And a lot of people who do that aren't necessarily familiar with the rigors of what it actually entails. When we're talking specifically about holiday rush type work, we can be talking about very physical labor, stuff that's warehouse work, shipping and receiving, like moving tons and tons of heavy packages all day, every day for 12 hours a day, potentially racking up overtime and such. And you take someone who's never done that before and put them into that kind of pressure cooker environment. And there's a lot of bad stuff that can happen. They can be worn out. They can suffer catastrophic injuries, things they don't really think about if they're not used to that kind of environment.
Look who's back, Bilal Kassem. Thank you for joining me in this episode, Bilal. How are you?
Good. I'm happy to be here, like always.
Excited to have you. I know we've had the other attorneys joining us for the other podcast, which is also very important for us. It gets to show different perspectives, different ideas from different attorneys. But can I admit that they all said the same thing you said, your favorite phrase? You don't know what you don't know, and it depends. For the most part, that's what a lot of the attorneys got. So I did miss you. But I didn't, because I felt like that's something you would obviously say to us as well. Today's topic is right around the corner based on the season that we're in, right? Seasonal employees. And you have to tell me everything that happened at your LA Times connection with one of the, what are they called? I wouldn't call them necessarily reporters. They're more just contributors to what would you say? Tell me a little bit about the experience you had with the LA Times recently.
A reporter from the LA Times actually just reached out to me and wanted to pick my brain about seasonal work, which is really funny because I think we were planning to talk about seasonal work. It is the season after all, but it's that big of an issue that I think it's something a lot of people are thinking about. And when we think about seasonal work, it's not just all sunshine and rainbows. I think there's a lot of complexity. There's a lot of injuries. There's a lot of people get taken advantage of around the holiday season.
Yikes.
And there's a lot of people who are stepping into work, shipping and receiving, warehouse work that's potentially really dangerous that have never done it before. And so it really is a hot topic in terms of workers' compensation law.
And I'm glad you brought this up. It's like people stepping into roles that they're not used to. They don't even know where to begin and how to properly prepare for these roles. And seasonal employees, who would you consider a seasonal employee? Obviously, we have people that work for Amazon and FedEx. They have to pick up extra shifts, right? So in your scope, who else is considered a seasonal employee?
When we think about seasonal workers, we're talking about two different buckets of people, I think. The first is what I think you'd think of in just casually. And if someone says they're a seasonal employee, it means, hey, they were hired around the holiday time to help with the holiday rush. Typically, it's associated with retail sales around Christmas time, along with the sales or the shipping, the manufacturing, the delivering, all that stuff. There's also seasonal employees in terms of migrant workers, farm hands, things like that typically travel around and follow the crops and things like that throughout the seasons in different states to ensure they're working full time. There's also seasonal work in construction. Concrete guys don't work around Christmas usually. It's raining too much. But I think most commonly, we're really talking about the seasonal workers who work in a retail environment or supporting a retail environment in the shipping, manufacturing, and delivering industries.
So now it's important that despite the temporary nature of their job, the season, they're still an employee. They're still a worker in California, which gives them the benefits as any other worker would. And I think, would it be safe to say a lot of seasonal workers don't realize that they also have the same rights as a full-time employee that is not a seasonal worker? Of
course. In California, everyone's an at-will employee unless there's a contract specifying otherwise. But a lot of people think even if they have a contract that they're a quote unquote contractor or independent contractor. And being an independent contractor or contractor is much different than actually being a contract employee. So they're very two distinct things that I think a lot of people separate. And sometimes they're told, oh, you're just a contractor, so you don't get benefits, you don't get overtime and things like that, even if they're just an employee on a contract rather than actually being an independent contractor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really big misconception that we can dive into an entire different topic on that just alone. Let's talk about the undocumented, because that's also a bracket that people feel like, I'm undocumented, I'm only hired for agriculture, I don't have any rights.
Yeah, it's typically what we see amongst migrant workers who are farmhands. It's quite frequently that they're housed on the property. They're paid insufficient wages. They're generally treated like crap. And the employers know this, and they take advantage of the fact that they're undocumented and that they're less likely to cause problems or raise objections to the way they're treated because they're not even supposed to be here or working in the first place. And so employers will take advantage of that and really treat people poorly. And we see it mainly in the farming population. Occasionally, we still see it in construction and things like that. I think the more dramatic times people are mistreated are in the farming side of things. If you're an undocumented worker, you're a worker in California. You're entitled to the same wage and hour protections as an employee that would be legally authorized to work here. You're entitled to the same workers' compensation benefits. It's, in fact, illegal to retaliate against someone or threaten criminal prosecution to gain advantage in a civil case. To the extent people will say, if you file your work comp injury, I'm going to have you deported and things like that. Totally not okay. And I think a lot of people who are undocumented, especially nowadays, are afraid to speak up because they're afraid of the repercussions potentially. But it's on the employer. If the employer chooses to hire you, in the state of California, laws protect you. It's simple as that. California does not like the idea that an employer can hire someone knowing that they're not allowed to work here and then turn around and deny them benefits after the fact when they get hurt or they're mistreated.
Is this because California has some of the most friendly worker labor laws than any other state that benefits in some way?
It's pretty good. I think California as a whole is pretty worker oriented, I would say. There's a lot of business owners that complain about California being too difficult to operate a business in. And sure, there may be some truth and complexity to the laws and operating costs here in California specifically. If you choose to make your bed here, if you choose to be an employer in California, you have to play by the rules. And California generally is a pretty friendly state for workers, whether we're talking about workers' rights for wage and hour, protections, benefits, workers' compensation. It's all fairly skewed towards ensuring that people who provide service for employers are treated fairly.
Yeah. And it works, right? California is one of the states with the most money. And obviously,
it's what, fourth GDP in the world now? We're clearly, by a financial metric, massive financial entity across the world. We have a booming economy, lots of different industries. We attract workers from all over the globe to come here because of the opportunity to earn and make something of yourself and contribute meaningfully to the world. It's California, for all its problems, mainly the roads, I'll say. If you've driven around the Bay Area, you know how terrible our roads are, especially El Camino. Aside from the roads, which they're trying, it's pretty great to live here. It's pretty great to be an injured worker here because of the protections you're afforded as well. Not great to be an injured worker at all, but if you happen to be injured, this is the place to go.
If you were to get injured, you'd want to get injured in this state.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. Okay, so tell me a little bit more about what you and the reporter talked about. Obviously, we did have a planned episode where we were going to discuss the fear of retaliation after getting an injury, maybe termination factors, who is a seasonal employee. But I want to pick your brain and talk about what that experience was with the reporters. So tell me, first and foremost, what did you guys share? What was that knowledge they were picking your brain about?
I think a lot of seasonal workers are stepping into jobs they've never potentially done before. A lot of people, especially around the holiday time, may feel the financial pinch that, you know, hey, I want to make sure my kids got the presents they want this year. I want to make sure I give them a good Christmas dinner or whatever it is. I want to make sure my family feels loved and taken care of around the holiday times. And money's tight these days. People are really feeling the squeeze financially between inflation, job cuts, tumultuous economy right now. And so I think a lot of people may consider stepping into part-time seasonal work to make up some extra cash around the holiday season. And a lot of people who do that aren't necessarily familiar with the rigors of what it actually entails. When we're talking specifically about holiday rush type work, we can be talking about very physical labor, stuff that's warehouse work, shipping and receiving, like moving tons and tons of heavy packages all day, every day for 12 hours a day, potentially racking up overtime and such. And you take someone who's never done that before and put them into that kind of pressure cooker environment. And there's a lot of bad stuff that can happen. They can be taken advantage of. They can be worn out. They can suffer catastrophic injuries, things they don't really think about if they're not used to that kind of environment. And there's people who are, bless our UPS drivers, who can do it for 30 years, but they know lifting techniques. They work with the union. They're well aware of how to go about advocating for themselves and taking care of themselves in the workplace versus someone who's seasonal doesn't really have that familiarity. And so we see a lot of injuries, we see a lot of complexities with labor and employment law. And I think it's really important if you're going to go do seasonal work, especially in a real intense environment, you're well aware of what you're getting into. And also too, you know how to take care of yourself once you're there, meaning know about what your rights are and know where to find job specific information about wage and hour laws, where to find OSHA regulations for your particular environment. If there are OSHA violations, knowing how to actually report those violations, knowing when to speak up, knowing when to go to the doctor and advocate for yourself if you have work restrictions. There's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah. I feel like the hiring process is super quick during seasonal time, and you read any of the handbooks or any documents that you get. You just like, all right, I just need to work. I need to get some extra money. Let me get out there and start working. You don't even know who to go to if you get injured, right? Like, where do you begin to file your claim? To who do I report this to? Because it's a very fast-paced situation. A lot of companies need the help ASAP. They just rush through the process that they normally wouldn't throughout the rest of the year. And you can easily fall into not knowing exactly what is putting you in danger. What are the rules for this specific role, as you were mentioning, right? Say you get injured and you're a seasonal worker. Do you even know who you're going to report this to? Do you even know who or how to get the DWC one from this new company that you just got hired from? And no, do you even have the rights? Like, what? Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. So obviously you need to take a step back, really figure this out. And then, okay, I'm ready. I'm armed with everything I need to know. Who do I go to? Who's my supervisor? Because there's a lot of blurred lines when it comes to getting hired. And I'll tell you, because I did that 1 year it was retail. And I was like young, didn't have much to do. So I was like, might as well just go make more money. And I ended up working for retail, very big chain, but I was so lost in the system, didn't know who to report to. There was so much miscommunication, which added stress on top of my everyday life. And I was just like, what am I doing? Is this even worth it? And not being able to sleep because did I report this? Was I supposed to work this morning and I didn't show up? And there was just a lot. And I can just assume what other people's go through as well during seasonal time. It's not, and many years later, we are in a completely different seasonal time than when I started working and doing that retail. Like, the demand is so much more, like 1,000 times more than when I was working.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest issues we see, at least on the workers' comp side, is people who step into a fast-paced environment who aren't used to working in that environment and not understanding how the mechanics of, for example, a shipping facility works. Someone who's a licensed forklift operator may know and understand what the limits are for stacking pallets and understanding load and distribution of weight and things like that. But you're just Joe Schmo's first day on the job at a shipping and receiving department, and there's forklifts flying everywhere and pallets flying. Like, you don't understand what's going on. Like, you don't understand the OSHA regulations and requirements for how things are supposed to be managed. And so for someone who doesn't understand those things, stepping into an environment like that, it can be potentially very dangerous.
That's great.
So it's really important. And Google, ChatGPT, whatever, there are fantastic tools out there that you can use to at least start to understand the basic rules, safety regulations, and how to conduct yourself when you're stepping into an environment like that, so you can be as safe as possible. And I half joke about the forklift, but we've had quite a few people at my firm that have actually been crushed by forklifts. And it's usually due to some level of horseplay, not on the part of the person who's injured, but like the person who's operating the forklift, dangerous heavy machinery, isn't paying attention. And that weirdly happens pretty often. We see a lot of stuff like that. And again, if you're a newbie and you don't understand the mechanics of how things work, you're setting yourself up for failure or injury, certainly, if you don't do some research ahead of time. Make sure you do research ahead of time. Make sure when you're there, you ask your supervisor or your HR and stuff for guidelines. Help them help you. Speak up about your concerns and ask a lot of questions about how to be as safe as possible when you're working in that environment.
I'm so glad you guys touched this on with the reporter for the LA Times, because these are things that you wouldn't otherwise think about, right? You just roll with the punches and go with the flow, and then you don't even stop to think. Hey, wait, I'm supposed to know this. Like, I should read this. Yeah, I'm just so happy you guys opened that can, because now if you're listening to the podcast and you are going to join the seasonal employee list, then make sure you follow these tips. What are some of the common issues faced by seasonal workers? What would you say is the biggest fear of retaliation, obviously, for injured workers when they're injured, when shit hits the fan?
I think that's a really hard question to answer. I think a lot of people go into seasonal work with the expectation that it's just going to be seasonal and that their life's going to move on afterwards. And they happen to have a really serious injury that happens. And looking at it, it's an unknown fear in the sense that you don't really understand how bad things can get when you are injured. Especially, we talked earlier about California being a great state for injured workers and just people working in general because of our laws here. But reality is workers' comp is still really inadequate for a lot of people. There's a lot of people who walk away who aren't made whole, who aren't getting the medical care, the benefits they deserve. And I think a lot of people are very cavalier about the idea of getting hurt and think, oh, it's not going to happen to me type attitude. And when it does, I think they're in for a rude awakening when they realize how serious it can be and how little companies, let alone insurance companies, actually care about them.
There's a lot of barriers, I think. Just being a seasonal worker, you're dealing with a lot. The rain, for one, the traffic, the holiday rush. Say you're working as a delivery driver and you have to deliver in areas where you're close to malls, like just the traffic, the amount of people stressed because they need to get that one Black Friday deal. And I don't know, it just creates a whole different scenario that I view as a worker. Like, you're stepping into the unknown. And yeah, that's definitely something that could potentially change your life if you're not well prepared for seasonal employment. So what else did you guys talk about?
A lot of it was, like I said, it's funny that we were going to do this because we talked about some stuff, but there's also stuff we didn't really cover all that much, which another one is wage and hour issues. A lot of people in a seasonal setting are asked to work overtime, certainly longer hours, and maybe not actually being compensated for their time. They're also entitled to meal and rest periods if you work a certain number of hours a day. And oftentimes workers in general are told to skip. I don't know if you remember the news story that came out, maybe it was like a year ago, about like the Amazon guys who like carry pee bottles in their trucks because they don't stop. They just keep driving and like they do whatever they need to do. Maybe they pull over and use their bottle and then just keep on delivering. The amount that they're asked to do within a finite period of time is extraordinary. And so from that perspective, really understanding, like, you got to take care of yourself, know your limits, understand when it's time to clock out for the day, understand that you're entitled to overtime if you are working more than 8 hours a day, understand that you're legally entitled to breaks and meal periods. Those can't be taken away from you as an employee, as long as you're an hourly, certainly. And so understanding that those safeguards are there for you, and to not let your employer abuse them and take advantage.
Okay, let's say someone gets injured and they're a seasonal employee. How does this play a role? And I'm just thinking calculator wise, like, I have my full-time job. This is a seasonal. How does the temporary disability benefits kick in? That's something.
Yeah. So it's a pretty common issue, to be honest. Usually we fight over temporary disability rates in workers' compensation. It's one of the most frequently debated topics. And the whole idea is when you get injured, you're supposed to receive temporary disability if you're off of work, of course. And that temporary disability is supposed to reflect what your ongoing earnings would have been had you not been injured. And so there's this idea that, hey, temporary disability is supposed to be based on the expectation of your continuing work. And so that's how we calculate your wages. And oftentimes we do that by looking back at the year leading up to your injury to say, hey, look, Sally worked 42 hours a week every week for the last 3 years. Pretty safe bet Sally was going to continue to do that. This should be her temporary disability rate. When you have someone who's a seasonal worker, it's a little bit different because maybe they get hurt on their second day on the job. They don't really have a long work history to look at, or they're in a situation where they were hired for seasonal only. And so that obviously can affect your temporary disability rate, because not just your rate, I should say, but your entitlement to temporary disability as a whole, because you had no expectation of ongoing employment beyond, say, 2 weeks. And usually the insurance company will say, hey, you were hired as a seasonal employee only, so we're not going to pay you temporary disability beyond whatever X date, which is a common issue we have to deal with. But when you think about temporary disability rates specifically for seasonal workers, we really think about just what is their earnings expectation. If they were hired for 40 hours a week and the second day on the job they got hurt, we just really have to take it at face value. And we always argue that, hey, look, this person was hired to do 40 hours a week. That's what they were working. Unfortunately, they got hurt on the second day. Use their rate as if they would continue to have worked. And we match their rate to their expectation for earnings.
You signed a contract and you have to fulfill what that promise was going to be. Had the injured worker not gotten injured, then they would have fulfilled it for sure. Okay. What if I have an extra job? What if I have a normal job and I picked up an extra shift in retail after, I don't know, or in a warehouse, and now I can't go to my first job and I'm losing earnings from that too?
So this comes up quite a bit too. The way workers' comp works, it's funny. You do get to take into account both wages. So if you have job A, which is your full-time job, and you have job B, which is your part-time holiday season job, and you get hurt at job B, and now you can't work at job A or B, right? You're out. The question is, do you get temporary disability based on both earnings? Subject to minimums and maximums and all that stuff, the answer is yes.
Woohoo!
The issue is the law states that, I say the law generally, like it's this ominous thing. The labor code specifically, I think it's 4656, talks about how you factor in wages from more than one job. And the rule is that you cannot take in wages at a higher rate than the job you were injured at. So if so the insurance carrier isn't responsible for paying you temporary disability based on higher earnings,
right?
At least as a rate at your full-time job. You can calculate that number of hours that you lost, but it's paid at the rate of the job where you were injured. So for example, let's say your full-time job pays you $30 an hour and you work part-time for the holiday season, making $20 an hour extra. Let's say your full-time job's, 40 hours a week and your part-time job's 10 hours a week. You would take in all the earnings from the 40 hours and 10 hours and combine that to come up with your average weekly wage, but it would be at the rate of $20 an hour and not $30 an hour.
Yikes.
So you're still getting temporary disability based on your lost hours, but it's paid at the rate of the job you were injured at. It can't be more than that. So there is some limitation to factoring in the hours from the other job and the rate that you get, but it does count towards what your temporary disability would be.
So now the question is it worth it for you to get and pick up that extra hours? Because if you were to get injured, you're facing face value based on what you're getting paid for that seasonal and not necessarily for your full. Is it worth it? That's where you have to outweigh it and be like, do the kids really need a PS5 this year? Do they really? Can we just work a budget where we can afford it eventually and not have to get me to work and be tired and setting myself up to where I'm going to be taking a really significant hit as a parent or even just as a worker in general? Yeah, I think about it twice.
Yeah, and we see it. You just always got to ask yourself, is the juice worth the squeeze? Sometimes it isn't. I think in most cases, people don't get injured. They have a good experience working seasonally. They can make some extra money to get their kids that PS5 or whatever it is, provide a meal for their family on the holidays. That's awesome. It's just understanding the risks and understanding what to do in the situation when something bad does come up.
Okay, so let's sum this up. It's very important for you if you're stepping into a seasonal work, to know your environment, number one, know who you're working with, know what you're working with, what are the limitations to the things that you're working with, know the guidelines, what is considered OSHA violation, understand that you don't want to break those rules. What else did you mention?
Understanding who you work for, whether you work for a PEO, a professional employment organization that is the employer of record that provides payroll and benefits, or if you're actually working directly for Amazon or whoever it is, and knowing which HR department you're supposed to go to find things that you need to take care of yourself. For example, if you do get hurt at work.
Okay. Those are really important things. Okay. Is there anything else based on the seasonal employees that we have not touched on? Because I know we record this once a year. It's very important. It's It's the season of seasonal employees. And we have to remember, has anything changed from last year to this year that you can think of as far as the law?
Not really this particular year. There was a big California case that came out. It went up to California Supreme Court. It's called Dynamex. This case was codified by way of AB5 as a statute. This was a couple years ago now. It really simplified the way we look at contractors, independent contractors, and employees. There used to be a case called, still a case, it's called Borrello. And that case was defining California Supreme Court case and how you determine whether or not someone is an employee or an independent contractor. And Borrello basically laid out like 11 different factors that we would look at essentially when we'd go to trial and try and prove that someone is an employee. And a lot of the factors were, they were fairly vague and was really fact dependent. And there was, of all these 11 factors, none of them were dispositive, meaning if you met one, it didn't mean that you're automatically an employee, and vice versa. If you didn't make 8 of them, it didn't mean you were a contractor either. But this AB5 statute, which was codified again by Dynamex, really simplified the test for whether or not someone's an employee. And I think that's an important discussion around seasonal work, where people are maybe potentially misclassified as independent contractors. You see this especially in smaller businesses where they think, oh, this person's just going to work for 2 weeks, so I'm going to send them a W-9 or whatever it is, and or 1099 them and pay them as an independent contractor, when in fact they are an employee. And that test basically is really simple now. It's, are you doing the thing that is the core of this business? Or are you holding yourself out as an independent contractor? That's really all it is. So there's a 3-part test to it. I'm paraphrasing a bit. But the gist of it is, look, if you're working for a small shipping and receiving company doing shipping and receiving, you are an employee. If you're a dental hygienist working for a dental office, you're an employee. It's the core function of that business. And so if you're asking yourself, hey, if what I'm doing is really germane to what this business does as a whole, and they're telling me I'm an independent contractor, it's probably wrong. And if it's probably wrong, that means you're not on the books as an employee, meaning you're not going to have workers' compensation. They're probably mispaying you. They're not giving you meal and rest periods or overtime. So I'd say for seasonal employees, just be careful that you're not being misclassified as an independent contractor just because you're on contract.
Yeah, super important. That's a really big one. Don't fall into the trap of being misclassified, because you can lose it all. Literally. Yikes.
Yeah. And when you're off to work getting hurt, if you're misclassified, and we're trying to sort out the insurance and join the state in and get the benefits, they're not getting medical care. They're not getting financial compensation. It can drag on quite a while to get things sorted out.
Definitely. But even if you're a seasonal employer and everything goes well and dandy, share your experience with us. I'd love to know positive stories behind seasonal employees as well. Maybe it does help in some way, shape, or form more than what we are actually.
Positive and negative, please. I love to hear the juicy gossip.
I am pretty sure there's people that have been through it with seasonal employees. Yeah, please share your comments below. We love reading this, and we love just seeing what's out there that we truly don't see. And we hope we didn't scare you with this episode. If you were planning to be a seasonal employee, again, this is truly meant for you to know and arm yourself with what you need to have in order for you to be protected, and just to take into consideration so it becomes a successful season for you, whether that's retail, whether that's working for a warehouse, or even for those little companies where shipping and receiving does happen. Just make sure you protect yourself as any way possible. And if you have questions, feel free to reach out and get a free consultation. You can definitely do that. And it's on the description below too, how you can get that as well. Bilal, is there anything else you want to share before we say goodbye on this podcast?
No, I think we're good for today.
Yay. Awesome. It was a pleasure having you once again, Bilal. And if you want to follow us on social media and get to know every other detail we speak about inside and outside seasonal workers, then I suggest you hit the subscribe button and the bell notification so you get notified when we upload new content. Don't forget, we are sponsored by Pacific Workers, the Lawyers for Injured Workers. There's a separate YouTube channel for that as well. I'll link it on the description below. So if you guys want to follow that channel, which also has different information than you would have here in the podcast. It's weird. The podcast really goes into depth into those really good burning questions people have. But at the Pacific Workers channels, you'll have similar things, but a little sprinkle of here and there of different things that are in a shorter version and quickly in and out, but still nonetheless very important information regarding the California Workers Comp. And TikTok. If you're a TikTok fan and fanatic and you love to scroll and want quicker access to information, then go check out our TikTok channel as well. And yeah, we'll hope to catch you guys on the next episode of Work Comp Talk. Bilal, I hope to see you soon.
Thanks.